Welcome to Dare, the show for innovators, entrepreneurs, and startup leaders who dare to shape the future. Your hosts today are Ned Hayes and Cecilia Mariani. Dare is brought to you by Darwaf, the superpower tech team that can make your vision a reality. We're happy to welcome Joe Shasteen to the podcast today. Joe is the global manager of advanced analytics at RetailNext, the leading in-store analytics platform that's expressly built to address the changing face of modern retail. So RetailNext is really charting the way for the next generation of smarter experiences for consumers, I think in all sorts of industries and environments. We're really excited to have Joe here. So welcome, Joe.
Thank you. So happy to be here.
Welcome to the show, Joe. Can you start by telling us about your role at RetailNext?
Yeah, so I manage the advanced analytics team at RetailNext, and my team is primarily responsible for helping our retail customers better make use of the data that they have, both for understanding entrance traffic data and potentially pass-by traffic, as well as all of the data that can be captured inside the store through either strategically placed cameras or full coverage of a store in what we refer to as a retail lab. The advanced analytics team that I manage also can help customers with custom reporting. We do provide some overall traffic trend reporting as well. But ultimately, our role is to make sure that customers are getting the most use out of the data and understanding the best ways to operationalize and make better decisions based off the data that they can collect in their physical store environment.
Okay, thank you. So I have to ask you, why retail stores? Isn't e-commerce the wave of the future? As technology leaders, why should we care about retail storefronts?
Yeah, definitely. So, e-commerce is definitely an important aspect of, retail sales in the future, and managing kind of the convergence of the offline and the online shopping experience is extremely important for retailers. And, many of the conversations I have center around, what we can do. It's a very challenging question. And, many of the conversations that we have is around that. But just, for physical retail stores on their own, right? I mean, the vast majority of sales are still coming from physical stores. Over 80% of sales are through that channel. But it also remains an important way to acquire new customers, right? Online acquisition of customers is still fairly expensive in comparison. And finally, kind of maybe the most qualitative reason, but maybe also very important, is that stores are a way for brands to kind of communicate more directly with their customers and kind of control that overall experience that customers have when shopping that individual store or brand or whatever experience there. So it becomes the best way for brands to communicate directly and really curate that experience and provide that ideal experience to customers in a way that you can't quite do in an online environment where you don't know what other distractions are happening, what else is kind of taking away the customer's attention span. But in that store, you generally have more of a captive audience where you can really drive your message and, serve the brand message that you want to your customer base.
Right, especially post-COVID. I mean, people actually physically go to stores again, don't they?
Yes, definitely.
Yeah, so it also sounds like there's some real hard data behind why you emphasize the retail experience. I'm curious, though, does RetailNext have plans to expand this kind of insight and this kind of information gathering beyond just physical retail storefronts? I mean, do you plan to expand to understand behavior elsewhere?
Yeah, so we actually already have started to expand. So a lot of the work that my team primarily focuses on, the advanced analytics team, is in traditional retail environments, understanding how people are shopping various areas. But we also have a lot of data that is, easily accessible, self-serve to customers, and they don't have to just be in the retail space. So any sort of instance where real-time data to understand occupancy or utilization of various areas around any sort of physical space, whether it is, traditional retail, office spaces, banking, restaurants, travel lounges, those type of environments where maybe, you do have some point of sale data, or you maybe have no point of sale data, but just where you can start to triangulate a little bit more and understand, the overall usage of certain areas, right? This can be used for like maintenance needs, crew needs for like servicing certain areas of your building, can also be in kind of more traditional retail environments, staff needs to make sure that you have enough people to serve all of the traffic and the amount of people in your locations. So there's many different aspects, but there's still a lot within retail where there's large opportunities, and we've still got a lot of work to do within retail. But even within outside of the space, there's still a lot of different metrics that we can use in traditional retail environments outside of those retail environments.
Yeah. So let's go to a personal question, Joe. When you go shopping, what kind of retail experience do you like?
Yeah, that's a really interesting question. So, I think as I've kind of been studying customer behavior and how, shoppers perform, I guess I'll kind of merge that into my answer as well. But, I think at this stage, as probably for most customers, the ideal shopping experience is merging a bit of the online in the offline space, right? So understanding, what product am I interested in, what stores are carrying it, and is the store by me, does it actually have it in inventory, so that if I want to, make the trip to the store, is it available that I can try it on and, feel it and make sure that it's kind of what I was expecting from a quality perspective. So, that's something I find would probably be a part of that trip. And then, another aspect too is kind of the interaction with the associates is something I find also very useful. But at the same time, there's a certain point in the trip in which I would like to have that. Usually, I'm kind of like to explore a bit for myself and then kind of search out employees when I have specific questions, but then making themselves available kind of that I know that they're there in case I have any questions, also very valuable to me. So, I think those are kind of the experience I like to have, also a little bit more of like an independent shopping experience, but then, when it's necessary, having some of those interactions with maybe the, more knowledgeable brand ambassadors and employees in the store is really going to, help drive kind of my ideal shopping experience at this time.
Right. So taking that ideal shopping experience in your head, do you actually bring that into the analytics work that you do as you drive your team forward?
Yeah, I think it's a little bit, we tried to be unbiased, right, and try to analyze the store, because all store environments are, very different. I mean, there's some definite, high level takeaways that you can make and generalizations about how customers behave. But really, as you get into each unique, lease space or each unique part of a store, it really can impact how customers behave. So, we really have kind of our main takeaways that we expect, right? Decompression zones at the beginning of the store, giving customers a chance to kind of gather themselves and look for the right signage on where they want to go and continue to shop. But, from that perspective, each environment is completely different. The products can be very different. The layout can be very different. So really trying to go in with those takeaways, but also not letting that kind of bias the analysis in the way that we're trying to, deliver key insights to our customers who are really trying to understand unique behaviors in their, unique environment.
Right. And you've been at RetailNext for 8 years now, right?
Yes.
Yeah. So during that time, what have you seen change in terms of what RetailNext has been doing? That's a big question. So maybe you can make it small.
Yeah. So, it kind of started out with, back when I first started, everything was on-prem. So, moving over to, Google Cloud and everything there has definitely been a big change and really allowed our customers to access a lot more of our data, kind of self-serve aspect, right? So, always traffic and the data, kind of entrance traffic and sales data that's uploaded in labor data, that was always available. But really kind of moving over to more, of our cloud processing has allowed us to kind of really make the data for interior analysis more readily available to customers. So now they can do, without engaging with my team at all, they can draw zones in their store, understand how people are shopping those different areas of the store, what are the kind of the most effective areas for new product, run A/B testing. Really kind of what I've seen is really an expansion of kind of the ability for customers to run their own test and design their own, test and learn, strategies in stores, where we have these environments. And I think that's been kind of a major factor in kind of the growth of RetailNext, is allowing our customers to access the data themselves, but also have access to, great support and, my team if they have any questions around how to use the data or, operationalize the data at this time.
Yeah, so how has your company RetailNext grown during your 8 years there? Have you gone global?
Yeah, so we've always, had stores globally. We have, recently, made some acquisitions in the UK to kind of drive additional business there. So, we will be planning to start, publicizing more data on traffic trends in the UK and Europe as well. So that is kind of coming down the line. But even just what I've seen in the expansion of kind of our prediction data sets around, helping our customers understand, what can we expect for your peak traffic, coming up over the, next 45 days? what should you be doing from a staff and a labor allocation perspective to make sure that you have enough people in store to kind of meet the demands, the traffic that's coming in, right? And then is there any other sort of, staffing needs that you need in certain areas of the store? Is it a queue management systems? How can you use this data and the predictions data that we have, readily available to everybody to plan better for the future and really make the shopping experience, what you want it to be for the customer, as efficient as you want it to be, make sure that they have the right experiences and are seeing the right products. That's really, a big benefit to kind of what we've been doing kind of as we've been kind of expanding our product offering over time.
Yeah, and well, I've been a leader of technical teams for many years as well. So I am curious, because you are a leader of a team, what do you look for in your team? What qualities do great technical team members have for you?
Yeah. So when I'm, talking to people about, potentially joining the team, I think kind of, most importantly is the ability to analyze data and synthesize large data sets and, come up with some overall highlights and recommendations based on what you see in the data. So, it comes down to both the technical aspect of being able to clean the data, analyze the data, understand the data, but then also more of the consulting, kind of the business side of things. What does that actually mean for someone in a retail environment, and how can they action on this data? And, either test out new fixtures, new displays, test out a new staffing model. What can they do to actually see if they can improve performance based on the data that we have in store? And, we really find that there's a lot of, in some cases, kind of low-hanging fruit that can be taken into account, and they can, really do better planning and, make certain allocations due to staff based on just some initial data that comes in, immediately from just entrance traffic for many locations.
Well, speaking of entrance traffic, RetailNext has been responsible for driving the idea of measuring foot traffic in stores, right?
Yeah, we've been at it for a long time now, over a decade, with measuring traffic in stores for sure.
Yeah. So how did you personally get into that area or that field of innovation?
Yeah, so I've always been interested in data. Started out kind of doing market research for a consulting firm, and then moved over to RetailNext just because I thought the data was so innovative, right? I mean, it's not many instances are you getting to understand the true shopping journey of customers in a store. So entrance traffic, right? That's been around a little bit longer. We are very confident in that data, and that there's a lot of great insight that you can generate from that. But really what drove me to RetailNext was kind of the interior and understanding more about those shopping journeys and really getting more of those kind of e-commerce style analytics in a physical retail store. At the time when I joined around 2015, e-commerce style analytics, so it was everything that everybody in the Bay Area was, working on, Google Analytics certifications and all of that. So RetailNext, was really one of the ways that I saw of kind of bridging that and providing a really unique data set into questions and that could never really been answered before, right? You always kind of had the bottom of the funnel with sales, but you didn't really understand necessarily the middle of the funnel or even the top of the funnel with traffic, as not everybody had that. So it was really kind of shining a light onto areas of data that had never really been analyzed before or been able to analyze before, and that was, I thought, was really groundbreaking and unique, when I was first considering going to RetailNext. And, it's been a long time, and I've seen a lot of advancements there in all of the product, and, it's been really an interesting time there.
Yeah, RetailNext also does a lot with computer vision and video analytics, that's correct?
Yes.
Can you tell us more about what's being done with today's computer vision technology?
Yeah, so there's a lot that we can do. A lot of it is dependent upon what the customer is requesting. But I think kind of one of our good examples was in an environment where there's a lot of staff members kind of out on the sales floor selling to customers. Using some of the machine learning algorithms there's in the cameras that we install, the Aurora, in order to identify those staff and segment that out from the customers, right? So in this case, it was a bit of a unique uniform that those staff members were able to wear. So it was a little bit of a easier process in training the cameras. But being able to do that was really powerful and was really useful for that customer in order to understand, where are those shopper and associate interactions happening most frequently in the store? How can we continue to meet customers where they're at, providing more insight into labor to help them make their job easier for them. That's one way that we've definitely used machine learning. And I know, there's a lot of other stuff in kind of the R&D side of things, with being able to identify more specific like shopping behaviors, such as, reaching for a shelf, trying on product, things like that.
Right.
So yeah, many different kind of options and a lot of potential for ML within RetailNext, but also outside of RetailNext as well.
It sounds like with some of the early learning in machine computer vision, you were able to see employees in uniform who would be very identifiable. But when you have consumers in a store, typically they aren't so identifiable. So like Amazon Go has experimented with analyzing human behavior in order to just say that person reached in, they took this thing, therefore it's a purchase. Do you see that experiment by Amazon being kind of the future of analytics and the future of purchasing in retail?
Yeah, I do think there are definitely aspects of that are interesting, right? I think there's, some of it is a little bit, different in kind of maybe apparel environments, right? Where merchandise might be changing more frequently, and it's not going to be kind of your more staple goods that maybe Amazon Go might be selling in certain instances where they might not be changing quite as frequently. But yeah, I definitely understand that nobody wants to get into a queue to check out if they can avoid it, right? So
Right.
I think whatever we can do in the retail industry to make queue time shorter, to make them more efficient, to make sure that there's enough staff there, to make sure that the lines are not getting too long, that's always going to be beneficial, right? So I think whatever aspects we can do from a technology perspective to continue to drive that, that's going to be important in the long run. And I think where it is applicable, that model will make sense where it's possible. But I don't necessarily think it can happen in all environments, but I think taking the learnings from that and seeing where you can make those aspects more efficient is always going to be something that we're going to be interested in, and I think is going to be important in the future for retail as well.
You said in recent video that working in data is all about transparency. Why is transparency so important in consumer data?
Yeah, so from my perspective on that, I've always been very curious about the kind of the underlying data, right? The raw data that you're actually capturing, right? So understanding if you see something in a data set that is surprising to you, can you go back and really look at the root cause of that and understand what might be driving more of that trend that you're seeing? So I think from my perspective, having the ability for our customers to be able to go in and watch video and understand unique shopping journeys, or understand overall what is happening with my associates when they're interacting with customers, I think that's really important and can really demystify some of the data that's being collected, right? I can show a bunch of numbers and say 15 people dwelled in this area, but if I can show you that 15 people dwelled in this area and then also show you the 20-minute video of what those people were doing in this area, it's going to be a lot more useful to you and really understanding some of the nuances in the shopping behavior, and really allow you to design your physical spaces more efficiently for customers, right? To really make sure that they have ample space to shop, ample time to shop, where they're not getting run into as people are trying to walk by them to get to other areas of the store. So, from my perspective, one aspect of transparency is just, where does the root source of the data, and can you see it, and can you confirm that everything looks accurate and how you would expect? And then also just from, the data models that we run, as much as possible, trying to make sure that our customer understands, what assumptions are we making when we're trying to model the customer behavior, what other aspects need to be considered, other nuances, because these environments are so dynamic and oftentimes there's so much going on. It's not always just a simple answer, and customers need to, be made aware of that to the point where they can make the right decisions and the right tests, where it's important for them to make those considerations. So I always try to make sure that customers are aware of everything that's being included in their data sets and understand how all of that's being calculated. Find that very important, and actually really helps them make more use and better use of the data, really, as they're operationalizing it and making business decisions off of it.
Right, and we've seen a lot of changes about how consumer data is treated, especially with the GDPR, and California also has rules around data transparency and the portability of consumer data. So I'm sure that has had an impact on what you do, right?
Yeah, it has, and I think a lot of that is also from our product team, and they're making sure that they're on top of all of that. I know, we definitely are very sensitive to privacy. We don't store any PII data. We make it, very clear that all of the data is anonymized, and we're not, storing anything like that. So it's been, definitely over the years, there's been a lot of developments in that space. And, we've really always made sure that we are on the right side of not collecting any PII that's going to, be potentially a problem for retailers or ourselves.
Yeah, just a short explanation for people who don't know. Maybe you could explain what PII is.
Yeah, so personally identifiable information. So, that can be anything that could help you identify an individual, whether it's, credit card numbers, facial recognition, things like that, right? So all of our data is, anonymized. We will take anonymous IDs. We will not take any sort of that information into our systems. So it just, make sure we're protected as well as our customers are protected from running, opposite any of the laws that are being, passed at these times. But yeah, that's generally where RetailNext falls on that side of things.
Yeah, thank you.
And what's wrong with the idea of black box e-commerce algorithms? Why should we understand what is being done with our data?
Yeah, so I do think in some cases, right, they're useful, right, especially if they are providing valuable information. But I think it's just important to kind of recognize some of the limitations, right, and that you're not always going to understand, again, some cases, right, what is the root source of the data, right? In theory, it should be simple, but again, making sure that you understand where the data is coming from, how it's being collected, what are those rules, and then also understanding like what are some of the biases built into those models, right? Sometimes the results might make sense, but sometimes they don't. And if it's a model where you don't really understand all the inputs or you really understand, what it's running, can you really explain it and can you really replicate that across, various environments or various tests that you're running? And is that then going to potentially impact the analysis that you're doing? Is it not going to be something that you can really test and learn and measure based off of that data? So I do think there's definitely a lot of value in, some of those algorithms and what they do, but I think it's just important to kind of keep in mind, some of the limitations with them and maybe not fully seeing under the hood and everything that they have included in those models is something that, can impact the way that you can test and learn in these environments.
Right. I think once upon a time, we all were kind of ignorant about what was being done with our data. But now there's a lot more consumer attention on, turning off cookies or changing what personal data is exposed. And different entities have different kinds of data, like brands and retailers. Like the brand online might have some data, the retailer in person might have other data. So how do you get brands and retailers to work together to share data that creates a better consumer experience?
Yeah, I think that's a great question. And I think that is definitely something that's still developing, right? I think there's a few customers who do this, but I think there's still kind of some hesitancy, right, of making sure that, everything that is being shared makes sense, right? And, there's still lots of questions with, how can you monetize the data and share it in a way that is going to be beneficial for both sides? But I think that kind of the key factor is really making sure that the retailer that's sharing the data is, understands what the asks are and kind of how they can tailor the data to, meet the needs of the asks that are being made of them from their brands or, the CPGs that they might be working with. So, we've done this in a few instances. Oftentimes it can be in cases where, maybe the brands themselves are offering some staffing, right? They might staff their area individually and they want to know kind of, what traffic might look like in these specific areas so they can better make inputs into their staffing models and make sure that they have enough coverage. So, it really does just kind of depend on the instance. And, we've really worked with them to make sure that, there's going to be no liability from, again, kind of going back to PII. We're sharing things that is anonymized, aggregated data that's still going to be, beneficial for both the brand, but also kind of make sure that the retailer is not exposing themselves in any way. So, working with them to make sure that they're comfortable with them, a lot of conversations between the two sources about what's necessary and kind of, what we're thinking about the data is always, important when we're kind of working with data sharing among, multiple partners here.
And can you tell us just one story about the successful collaboration that led to a better consumer experience?
Definitely. So I think, one example more specifically in kind of the data sharing area, I think I kind of alluded to it, but there was an electronics retailer that we have that basically set up different portions of their store as brand boxes. And within those locations, they set up, cameras to understand customer and associate behavior in those specific areas, right? So understanding how many people, what are my peak times of day when I'm going to have most people shopping these brand boxes? Can I adjust my staffing for that? Do I know there are certain areas of my brand box where people are coming in immediately? And that's the first point of contact that they have with my brand. Can I provide more guidance to my associates in that area to, if we want to kind of make the introduction at that point and start guiding them at that, at that first stage as they start shopping, we can do that there, or provide more guidance to wait a little bit longer that let them approach the product, right? So just giving more of the brand itself more data so that they can better tailor the experience that they are now managing within these spaces for the customer, and which ultimately is just going to improve sales, which is going to benefit the overall retailer as well, right? As sales and the communication between customers and associates in those areas are more informed, and the associates are able to do their jobs better.
Oh, that's great to hear. Well, it sounds like a lot of collaboration had to happen there to make it all work, right?
Oh yeah, definitely. I mean, and even in cases where there's not data sharing or data monetization aspects, there's a lot of collaboration between RetailNext and our customers about designing tests and what is the best way to really improve customer experience or staff experience, right, and making it a better place for them to work. So there's lots of examples just even outside of the data sharing where using traffic data or interior traffic and dwell data can really help improve that shopper experience and improve the experience for the associate as well, so that it's a good place to work. Because I have, also in many conversations recently, it's very challenging to hire in many retail environments as well. So making that a better place to work where people want to come back and work there is also something that's going to be very valuable. And investing in your associates is kind of a really important factor for retail in a very challenging labor market as well.
So thank you, Joe. To wrap up, let me ask you to think into the future. In working for a world of data transparency and better data analytics, what kind of world are you daring to create, Joe?
Yeah.
What do you dare to,
Okay,
our question that we are asking to everybody, what do you dare to dream might be possible?
So I think this kind of goes back to the initial point I made about online and offline convergence. I think that is generally tended to be the key question that I've been kind of searching for the best ways to merge those data sources together and provide that more seamless experience, both understanding what shoppers are doing on the phone or on their laptop at home before coming into the store versus once they get into the store, where are they shopping, what are they doing. I think we're still working to that point, but I think really understanding more about that overall journey is definitely some place that I see the advanced analytics team at RetailNext continuing to explore over the next 5 to 10 years, continuing to work with making sure customers are connecting their data sets, their point of sale data with their traffic, their labor, making sure they're optimizing there as much as possible. But, I really think it all comes down to understanding that online and offline journey for customers. And that seems to be a key question that a lot of people are asking about, and have been asking about for many years.
Great. Well, thank you for that great perspective that you provided us, Joe. This has been a real whirlwind of knowledge about retail analytics and the future of using consumer data in that regard. Thank you so much.
All right. Thank you both so much. I really appreciate your time as well.
Thank you very much.
Bye.
Bye.
Thanks to our guests today for their great insights on DARE, the podcast for innovators, entrepreneurs, and startup leaders. If you'd like your story to be featured on DARE, just contact us at info@darwaft.com. DARE is brought to you by Darwaft, the tech team that can make your vision a reality.